Good evening. My name is Kate Contino from the MTA. I will serve as this evening's hearing officer for this virtual public hearing, the seventh of 8 virtual hearings, including 2 satellite hearings, to provide the public with the opportunity to comment on the proposed changes in MTA fares and tolls affecting transportation on MTA subways, buses, commuter railroads, bridges, and tunnels, and the Staten Island Railway. To make the public aware of these hearings, advertisements were published on 13 print media outlets, including multilingual outlets throughout the region. Notice of these hearings were also published in press releases and posted on the MTA website, along with multilingual signs and digital displays in stations, buses, and trains. The MTA also provided notice of the hearings on social media. The MTA's Fare and Toll Hearings website is new.mta.info/2020 hearings. It describes these proposals in detail. Due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, we are conducting this meeting virtually via Zoom's online platform and conference call feature, with a live stream available on the MTA Fare and Toll Hearing website. Governor Cuomo's Executive Order 202.76 permits the MTA to conduct these fare and toll hearings remotely. This hearing is an opportunity for members of the public to comment on the proposals. Members of the MTA Board of Directors and senior staff are here to listen. So board members will be listening, not commenting. The MTA subject matter experts are available to answer your questions in the Zoom Q&A function this evening. The Q&A function is available only if you are logged into the Zoom webinar online, and it is located on the lower portion of your Zoom window. If you are attending via Zoom online, type your question into the Q&A function, and a subject matter expert will answer your question if it is deemed to pertain to the subject of this hearing. In addition to the virtual hearings, there are several other ways you can provide comment, ask questions, or make requests. We encourage the public to comment via the Fare and Toll Hearing website, new.mta.info/2020 hearings. You may also send a letter to MTA Government and Community Relations, Fares and Crossing Changes Virtual Public Hearing, 2 Broadway, New York, New York, 10004, or call the public hearing hotline at 646-252-6777. Telephone agents are available from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. daily. And I should emphasize that every bit of public comment, including spoken comments today and at the other hearings, all correspondence, emails, phone calls, and comments will be transcribed and incorporated into the official record and provided to the board members so that they can review them prior to final consideration of the fare and toll proposals. For the record, today's date is December 14th, 2020. The time is now 5:35 p.m. Now let me briefly describe the procedure for today's hearing. I will call the names of people who have registered to speak in the order which they are registered. The one exception here is that if you have already spoken at a virtual public hearing during this round of hearings, you will be moved to the end of the queue after all registrants who have not spoken at a previous virtual public hearing have had an opportunity to speak. We opened registration for today's hearing on Monday, November 23rd, 2020 at 10 o'clock a.m., and registration closed at 5 p.m. yesterday. We will remain here until all registered speakers are heard. All participants will be muted upon joining the Zoom webinar. When your name is called, please enable your camera and microphone by clicking the camera and microphone icons on the bottom of your Zoom screen. We will give you 10 seconds to turn your camera and microphone on before moving on to the next speaker. In the event that your name is called and you are not present, we will read your name again in the order it was initially called at the end of the list of pre-registered speakers. We will close the proceedings 15 minutes after the last name is called, once we exhaust the list of speakers. When you begin speaking, please provide us your name and any affiliation you wish to announce so that we have it for the record. And this is important so that we can be fair to all speakers. We ask that you keep your remarks to our limit of 2 minutes. The clock on the screen will indicate how much time you have remaining, and a warning light and beep will remind you that you have 30 seconds left to conclude your remarks. If you run out of time, remember you can submit complete written testimony to supplement your oral testimony. CART captioning and American Sign Language interpreters are available at this hearing. Thank you all for listening to all of that. Now let me introduce the MTA Board of Directors and senior executive staff that are here with us today. From the MTA Board, we have Commissioners Albert, Barbas, Khaleesi, Glucksman, Brown, and Law. MTA leadership is presented this evening by Chairman Patrick Foy, Bob Ferran, Mario Peliquin, Danny DiCrescenzo, Craig Cipriano, and Sarah Feinberg. Now I will turn it over to MTA Chairman and CEO Pat Foy for his opening remarks.
Thanks, Kate. I want to thank you all for being with us this evening virtually as we continue the MTA standard biennial review of fare and toll policy. We recognize that this year is anything but standard. The pandemic has affected and impacted us all in profound and lasting ways, which makes this process all the more complex and challenging. Since 2011, the MTA has implemented fare adjustments roughly every 2 years, and a proposed change to fares and tolls with a 4% revenue yield, equal to 2% a year, has been previously included in next year's budget. To be clear, the current fare proposals are not intended to address our current financial crisis caused by COVID-19. As you probably know, as a result of COVID-19, the MTA is facing the worst financial crisis in its history, far exceeding anything we've dealt with in the past, even the Great Depression. Because of precipitous declines in ridership and revenues, we're facing a projected $16 billion deficit over the next few years. We have aggressively sought additional emergency aid from the federal government to fill our budget gap, but have so far been unsuccessful. The election of President-elect Joe Biden has given us hope on that front, but we are still facing the prospect of divided government in Washington, which could threaten the progress of another stimulus package with enough support for what the transit industry and the MTA need. So we must plan for the worst and hope for the best. This means we have some very tough decisions ahead, which could include service changes and reductions in positions, and a continued freeze of the MTA capital program. To be clear, we don't want to take any of these actions, but our dire financial outlook gives us no other choice. We are committed to reviewing a wide variety of options to find the best way forward and adjusting plans as needed based on latest developments. For the topic at hand this evening, biennial fare and toll policy review, our goal is to minimize impact on New Yorkers in these difficult times. Still, we know that any increase will hurt New Yorkers, especially those in areas who depend on the MTA the most. It's clear that this is one of the most uncertain and challenging times ever, not just for the MTA, but for all New Yorkers. We appreciate you taking the time to make your voices heard on these proposals. This is a tough time for New Yorkers, and we remain dedicated to keeping this region moving, as our employees have done tirelessly this entire year. The MTA remains on high alert and will do everything we can to minimize health risk to our customers and our employees as we continue navigating through uncharted waters. We look forward to hearing from all of you this evening. Thanks for participating.
Thank you, Chairman Foy. Tonight we have 75 registered speakers. As a reminder, if you have joined this Zoom under a name that is not what you registered to speak under, please identify yourself with the name used for registration in the Q&A function. When your name is called, there will be a brief transition to allow you to turn on your camera and unmute your microphone. We will now call the first public speaker of the evening. The first speaker is State Senator Gustavo Rivera.
Okay, good afternoon, folks. Should just begin?
Again.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm State Senator Gustavo Rivera, representing the 33rd District in the Bronx, and I represent a constituency that overwhelmingly relies on public transit. I represent essential workers who continue to travel to our healthcare systems and front lines and constitute the stronghold of remaining riders as the pandemic has emptied our trains and buses. But to be clear, it is my constituents that you are asking to help this agency make ends meet, while putting forth proposals that sadly fail to acknowledge alternative measures or the devastating impact that these changes would have on them, my constituency. So I'm here to share my full-throated opposition regarding the MTA's proposed changes to your fare policy. Now, while I understand that this crisis has put an already cash-strapped public transportation system in an even worse financial situation, we cannot ask everyday New Yorkers to bear the burden they have already sacrificed enough. Now, we'll underscore that the federal government should be working to help fund public transit during this time, but we cannot rely on them alone to achieve this. New York can and should adopt proposals that would raise a substantial amount of revenue for public transit and other necessities. Public services need support from every New Yorker, so that the MTA. So I believe that the MTA should join the call, even as a public agency, to make billionaires pay. The ultra wealthy must contribute their fair share to support the city and state that they call home. And the financial burdens of the MTA cannot be placed on families who are struggling to put food on the table. So a fair increase in cuts to services that mostly affect essential workers, frontline heroes, and the lowest income New Yorkers is an offensive proposal that should be rejected. So on behalf of thousands of strap hangers in my district and around the metropolitan region, I oppose any fare hikes and the additional proposals that will create undue challenges for working class New Yorkers who ride public transit. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Senator. The next speaker will be New York City Council member Vanessa Gibson, followed by State Senator Shelley Mayer.
Mute. Okay, thank you so much, and good evening to each and every one of you. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to all of you. I am Bronx Councilmember Vanessa Gibson of District 16, and I am honored to join with my State Senator Gustavo Rivera in firmly opposing all of the proposals on tonight's agenda, recognizing in this COVID-19 pandemic that has truly had a disproportionate impact on communities of color, hardworking immigrant New Yorkers, first responders, essential workers. We have to do more. I applaud the efforts of the MTA and New York City Transit for being a champion and asking the federal government to pay its fair share. I agree with you and stand with you. I also agree that it is important to look at revenue generating options in the state legislature, as mentioned, and certainly not supporting a lot of these proposals on the backs of hardworking strap hangers that really rely upon public transit to get to and from. Raising the base fare by 2% of an increase, raising the base by 4%, eliminating unlimited Metro cards, keeping the base fare flat, eliminating the bus coinage. A number of items that are on your agenda today will really have a disproportionate impact on those very workers that we strive to represent each and every day. I appreciate all of the work that MTA has done, and certainly in my county of the Bronx, we have added a number of train stations for ADA access, which I appreciate, but I really believe that we have to be creative in our approach and identify new alternatives to bring in revenue and not balance any budget deficit on the backs of hardworking New Yorkers that rely on MTA, New York City Transit, to get by. And so I thank you for your time tonight. I hope all of the board members hears the cries of so many New Yorkers that rely on your service each and every day. Thank you so much, and I look forward to our continued work. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to note that we've been joined by Commissioner Cortez Vasquez. The next speaker will be Senator Shelley Mayer, followed by Senator Luis Sepulveda.
Good evening, Chairman Foy, members of the board, and senior staff. I'm State Senator Shelley Mayer, representing the 37th Senate District, the suburbs of New York, from the Bronx border in Yonkers to the border with Connecticut in northern Westchester. And my district, too, is totally dependent on the MTA and New York City Transit in the pre-COVID days and hopefully in the post-COVID days. I, too, am here to express my opposition to the proposed fare increases and to call on the MTA to exhibit as much creativity as is possible to restore confidence, enhance ridership, and bring people back to the system. We are fighting with you to get money from Washington. We join with you in insisting that the Senate leadership, particularly Leader McConnell, do their part to restore our system. But sadly, we cannot turn to cuts alone to solve this problem. My suburban district reflects the diverse needs of MTA ridership and the importance of working creatively and innovatively to avoid fare increases, service cuts, and staff and union layoffs that will drive ridership away from the system at the very moment we most need to draw riders back to the system. I join my colleagues in calling on the MTA to identify new ways to bring riders back to the system and avoid layoffs, including special fares for New York City, northbound day trips, student discounts, and special fares for suburban residents going back to New York City. Finally, I feel compelled to assert that MTA board members who promised to be responsive in our Senate hearings must do better in speaking with the elected officials who confirm them. We care about the MTA. We are here to fight with you and for you, but please communicate actively and regularly with us in order to hear our issues and the issues of our constituents. Thank you so much.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Senator Luis Sepulveda, followed by Assemblymember Kenneth Zebrowski. Please remember to unmute your microphone and enable your camera. The next speaker will be Assemblymember Kenneth Zebrowski.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Chairman Foy, and to all the executive board members and senior staff. Well, I join the concerns of my colleagues that spoke previously before me. I believe I'm the first person to speak who represents a west of the Hudson County, one that it's likely, if further decisions are made, we'll have not be talking just about fares, but we'll be talking about zero train service for a county that's in the MTA district, a county that pays the same sales tax, the same mortgage recording tax, the same payroll tax as all the other counties, but is likely, perhaps by the end of the week, if decisions are made, will have zero train service. Now, I've talked to many of you over the years, both in Rockland and in the halls of Albany, and in various conferences about the $42 million value gap that I believe is now 8 years old. I think the last study was in 2012, about New Jersey Transit canceling express trains for a better part of a year, 2 years, 3 years, with zero ability of Rockland riders to get any focus on their issues. Those now seem to pale in comparison to what is expected, which is a full cancellation. I would ask all the members, before you make that decision, to make a common sense analysis of why Rockland County would remain in the MTA district. I've had a bill for a number of years. It's Assembly Bill 1883 that would allow Rockland County to withdraw from the MTA. It amends the bill from 1986, the last time this happened. I'm here tonight to tell you that every Rockland representative will push for that bill. We will withdraw from the MTA if that happens.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Assemblymember Amy Paulin, followed by Assemblymember Linda Rosenthal.
Hi, good evening, and thank you for letting me speak again. I'll try to be a little more conscious of my 2 minutes. Just to remind you, last time I was here, I spoke about the importance of maintaining service and the change that we need to help our essential workers, which is to restructure the fares, particularly paying attention to the 30-day passes. New York City, of course, basing their pass on 46 rides, which no longer take place for most people, and on the commuter lines to pay most attention to offering alternatives besides peak, because people are using the trains at different times. I did not get to speak about two things. One, it's often said that people buy daily passes or use daily fares because they can't afford to buy a 30-day pass. I think it's important that with technology, installments could be offered so that the 30-day pass becomes the pass of the essential worker, which it is. And other fare structures such as 7-day passes, mostly used by tourists, and other and single fares would not have the same importance for that set of workers. I also want to talk about the alternative flat fare for Metro North and Long Island Railroad, and believe it's unwise to completely overhaul the fare structure in our current climate. It will only result in large increase in fares for a number of commuters during a time of struggle who have no choice but to take the train to get to work. The alternative fare proposal also unfairly forces riders who live in suburbs close to the city, who are already paying higher property taxes than those in the suburbs far away, to subsidize riders who have chosen to live in the farther suburbs. There are several cities.
Please summarize your remarks.
Yes, I will just say we support all the green proposals, and this is a statement that is being submitted by 10 majority assembly members, all in the Westchester, Rockland area. So thank you for helping to save our mass transit. It is critically important. Thank you so much.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Assemblymember Linda Rosenthal, followed by Senator Robert Jackson.
Hi. Good evening. I'm Assemblymember Linda B. Rosenthal. I represent the Upper West Side and parts of Hell's Kitchen in Manhattan. I'd like to thank Chairman Foy and the rest of the board and staff for the opportunity to comment on your proposed changes. As a result of congressional Republicans' dereliction of duty, we are debating whether New Yorkers should be responsible for bailing out the MTA during a pandemic. The coronavirus has shined a bright light on the social and economic inequities baked into communities across the state. Since mid-March, many of my constituents have called and emailed my office to share the fears that haunt them throughout the day and into the night, the possibility of eviction notices, maxing out credit cards, running out of food, filing for unemployment, worrying about getting to work and back home safely. These pleas have fallen on deaf ears because Congress has done very little to ease the suffering of New York families. In the absence of assistance from the federal government, the MTA has proposed irresponsible fare increases and service reductions that will financially devastate New Yorkers. As my colleague said, I agree with them in opposing any fare increases. It's unfair to ask those who manage to struggle to hang on to a job because it still exists and they are hired to pay for this increase. I'm against the increase in 7-day and 30-day unlimited, raising fares on vulnerable and disabled New Yorkers by a quarter or $1 is a regressive tax. Those who ride the subways and the buses would have to shell out up to an additional $120 a year were those to be put in place. So we have to pressure Congress, as I know you all are doing and we are doing, and they have to provide us with money, but we cannot rebuild the MTA on the backs of New Yorkers.
Please
Thank you
summarize.
so much.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be State Senator Robert Jackson, followed by Senator Luis Sepulveda.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to come in front of you. My name is Robert Jackson. I'm a state senator that represents the 31st Senatorial District and chair of the Cities Committee in the New York State Senate. I represent 13 miles of Manhattan from Marble Hill all the way down to Chelsea. That includes a large portion of the A, C, and the number 1 trains, as well as numerous bus routes. I thank the MTA for replacing deep station elevators on the number 1, A, and C stops in northern Manhattan, and for continuing to do capital work on Dyckman Street as far as the elevator is concerned. My constituents that I represent know firsthand how important it is at the MTA to their daily life and the economic situation of New York and New York State. And as a state senator, I voted in April to support moving forward between budget lines to help the MTA balance their budget. Unfortunately, that measure was not nearly enough due to the plummet, the MTA revenue, and the bleak short-term and medium-term economic outlook for the city and the metropolitan areas. I feel that a fair hike at this point in time will place the burden of balancing the budget on the essential workforce that has been working during these very difficult times, and some even losing their life because of the COVID-19. And it is the wrong way to balance the budget. Most of the voting members of this authority have the luxury, if not relying on the MTA as their only way to reach their workplace, which is a situation for many of my constituents. So many of the people I represent are barely scraping by due to the pandemic, and making their commute to work even more expensive and limiting their opportunities to commute to their work or get job interviews is just wrong. I read the paper. Chuck is very hopeful. I am hopeful also. I do support the use of the Federal Reserve Municipal Liquidity Facility, even though it increases the debt. We hope Congress will increase the allocation for state and local aid, especially the allocation for transit. Those funds are our best option to save MTA right now, and I will continue to stand with my legislative colleagues, the executive branch, and this board to continue advocating. In the meantime, raising fares is not the way to go. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Senator Luis Sepulveda, followed by Kim Moscaratolo.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can. You can begin.
All right, thank you. First of all, I want to thank the MTA leadership and board members for scheduling these 8 virtual hearings on public commentary for the toll hikes. We are now facing in the state about a $16 billion deficit by 2024 after revenues from fares, tolls, dedicated taxes, and so forth. This is clearly the agency's worst financial crisis, and several proposals are being floated that are just not helpful to the people that I represent, including increasing the base fare, increasing the express bus fare, raising the base fare for single ride tickets up to $1, eliminating single rides altogether. None of this stuff is going to help the Bronx. The increasing surcharge for buying Metro cards from $1 to $3 is just something that would make a big difference in not getting my constituents to work and people that live in our community. And this restrained many of the city's essential workers who are still riding public transportation to and from work and who may not have other options for transit. Many of these essential workers, and particularly those that are undocumented, have still not received any financial assistance. Now, my constituents are falling behind on rent, on meals, and are accumulating immense credit card debt just to stay afloat. We know that the epicenter of New York's economic crisis is right here in my district, and particularly in the West Farms area, where unemployment rates hover around 26%, although the real rate is probably closer to 40%, and that's in September alone. And where more workers are currently unemployed. And since the pandemic started, we've tried to help so much with food and unemployment benefits, over 500 people since it started because they could not get their benefits. Now, with that being said, the cost of living in New York is already high, and New Yorkers cannot afford another burden. My district specifically consists of majority of Black and brown individuals and rely heavily on the MTA to get to work, get their kids to school, or get to daycare. So we cannot afford the rates to increase, especially at a time like this. We are the wealthiest nation in the world.
Please summarize your comments.
We hope to get all the federal benefits to avoid these hikes, but I am vehemently, strongly opposed with every breath in my body, every fiber in my skin to make sure that we do not raise these rates, because it'll be devastating to the people of the Bronx. Thank you.
Thank you. We've been joined by Jano Lieber. The next speaker will be Kim Moscaratolo, followed by Tianki Robin Yang. Please note there will be a brief transition as you are enabled to turn on your camera and microphone. Please make sure that once your screen updates, your camera and microphone are enabled, then begin your remarks.
Thank you so much. My name is Kim Oscaratolo. I'm a Democratic district leader on the Upper East Side of Manhattan and also a candidate for city council in the 5th Council District. And I'm here today to speak strongly in opposition to any fare hikes by the MTA. We are all aware of the MTA's current financial situation, but putting that burden on the backs of hardworking New Yorkers who rely on public transportation is unconscionable. In the past year, unemployment in New York City has increased dramatically from 3% to 13%, and low-income New Yorkers have been hit particularly hard. These are the people who rely on subways and buses to get to work, and already they've been disproportionately impacted by the shutdown of service during the night. So raising fares at a time when such economic uncertainty exists would be disastrous for this city. I also urge you not to discontinue the 7-day and 30-day unlimited ride cards. I have personally used the unlimited 30-day cards for years now, and they have been a lifesaver, especially at times when I found myself waiting for a bus late at night with no change and no MTA vending machine. Having been in a situation where I've been stuck waiting up to 15 minutes to use my card again because I accidentally swiped in on the wrong side of the station, I can attest to the fact that it is actually quite difficult to abuse the system. And finally, I would urge the MTA to avoid layoffs at all costs. Transit workers have already been hit so hard by the COVID-19 pandemic. Over 100 transit workers have died from the virus. Many of these people showed up and did their jobs in the earliest days of the pandemic when there was so much fear and uncertainty. We owe it to them to do everything we can to protect their jobs. I realize that the MTA is in a dire financial circumstance, but we must figure out ways to raise revenue for the agency without further burdening hardworking New Yorkers. Now is the time to invest in our public transportation infrastructure, improve service, including restoring 24-hour service, and protect workers who have risked so much to get us where we're going. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Tianki Robin Yang, followed by Francis Corcoran.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, please begin your comment.
Hi, good evening. Let me show my, good evening. My name is Tianqi Robin Yang. I'm speaking on behalf of New York Community League, a nonprofit organization representing the rapidly growing population of Chinese American on Staten Island. Within a few days, within the Chinese community alone, we have collected about 2,400 signatures from Staten Island drivers who either work or study in a different borough in New York City. And as law-abiding residents, we strongly oppose all unfairness imposed by MTA to Staten Island and Verrazano Bridge, and especially the plan to eliminate or reduce the resident discount for Staten Islanders. Most of us, our constituents, most of us moved from another borough of New York City, and we still have work and family connections in Brooklyn and Queens, and the fact that there's currently no East Asian supermarket in Staten Island, we have to go to get food from other boroughs for ethnic food in other boroughs, and we have to travel outside of our borough, and we have to pass this Verrazano Narrows Bridge. As we all know, by land, Staten Island is only connected to the outside by 4 toll bridges, and Verrazano Narrows Bridge is the only bridge that connects Staten Island to another borough of New York City. As one of the 5 boroughs of New York City, Staten Island is the only borough that has no single bridge that is free to its users. The VNB, the Verrazano Narrows Bridge that we rely heavily on, is one of the most expensive bridges in the country to use. And MTA provides no subway that connects Staten Island to any other boroughs. Neither does MTA provide us a network of rapid transit system with good frequency and coverage comparable to any other boroughs of New York City. Residents of Staten Island have to rely on driving. We really love if we have other options to travel, but we have to do that. We are forced to drive to other boroughs to seek employment because Staten Island economy is far from. And so it's very important for us to get interborough travel.
Our next speaker will be Francis Corcoran, followed by Gary Prophet. There will be a brief transition as you are enabled to turn on your camera and microphone. Please make sure that once your screen updates, your camera and microphone are enabled, and then begin your remarks.
Hi, does that work?
Yes, you may begin.
Great. Good evening. My name is Francis Corcoran, speaking as a member of the Metro North Railroad Commuter Council. As a council and a voice for the ridership, we are unified in our opposition to any fare hikes or increase of fees for any services across the MTA that would place an additional financial burden upon riders. It is impossible to comment on raising fares when faced with the prospect of 50% cuts to service. Why should riders pay more for less? We know that these are difficult times for Metro North and the MTA as a whole, but they are also extremely difficult times for families and businesses, and any increases passed along to them creates an undue hardship. We understand that the MTA is hurting, but so are riders. It is unfair to those who make the conscious choice to come back to mass transit to be punished by having to pay for the loss in revenue for those who have not. Increasing fares will cause more riders to get into their cars. Instead, we should be looking at ways to incentivize riders to get back on board. Reward those who lead the way in getting us back to where we need to be from a revenue standpoint. Be creative. For instance, we would support a discounted 20, 40, or 60 trip ticket with a longer expiration time, say 6 months or a year, that could replace a traditional monthly. Consider decreasing fares to increase ridership by looking at pilot programs that lower fares in times of lowest ridership to support our changing needs and the way we travel and encourage people to travel by train. On Wednesday, you'll be voting on a budget that includes revenue from fare increases. We urge you to reconsider and not to look at any other ways to make up that, and look at as many other ways as you can to make up those revenues. And it should not be on the backs of riders. Thank you.
Thank you. As a reminder, if you have joined the Zoom under a name that is not what you used to register to speak under, please identify yourself with the name used for registration in the Q&A function. Our next speaker will be Gary Prophet, followed by Alita Dupree.
Hello?
Yes, please begin.
Yes, I'm Gary Prophet, the president of the Empire State Passengers Association. I live in Ossining, New York. We represent the users of public transit all across the state, from Long Island all the way up to Western New York. First of all, I just want to state that the Metro North and Long Island Railroad fares certainly should not be decreased in the next year or two. If anything, they should not be increased at all. If anything, they need to be decreased to attract passengers back to the system, as COVID has simply decimated the ridership. People are simply driving into Manhattan and driving more and more instead of taking Metro North and the Long Island Railroad from the suburbs. Fares should be capped at approximately $300 a month for Metro North and Long Island Railroad for 2021 and 2022. This will attract back the much needed commuters from the longer distance commutes on the two commuter railroads. Any fare of the commuter railroads that is more than about 25 or 30 miles from Manhattan would be a monthly fare of $300 flat, even from places like Montauk and Poughkeepsie. Monthly subway tickets must remain. This is something that is used by essential workers and by people that are coming back to be daily commuters. We want the daily commuters back. We do not want to discourage people from taking the subway every day. Those are the people that the system and the MTA need back in order to fund the future into 2022 and beyond. The subway and bus fares should also not be raised until at least 2022. We need the people back, and we need to have the system to have the revenue in order to go into the future. This is a short-term situation. We cannot wreck the system for the long term just because of a short-term funding issue. As far as funding issues for the short term and even for the longer terms, items should be looked at, such as a federal gas tax or state gas tax, in order to fund operations in the future. We need to also keep the west of Hudson service and our current Long Island Railroad branch lines complete. Any decimation or elimination of those lines will just cause problems into the future.
Please conclude your remarks.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Alita Dupree, followed by Monica Tremblay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, please begin.
Thank you, Board Chair Pat Foy and committee members. Alita Debris for the record. My pronouns are she and her. This is big and important, and I'm trying to digest it all. First of all, I think we should keep the 30-day pass. I can do without the 7. But when I ride transit on any system, I ride it 4, 5, 6 times a day. So I burn through the multiplier pretty quickly. Really, we should have fare capping, but I don't think our technology allows for it. Hopefully Omni will, then we don't have to think about that. We have to simplify our system. I think we should eliminate the single ride option because Omni is on the way. You tap your card or your phone and you go. Most transit agencies have card fees in the range of $3. So, I mean, we want people to keep their cards and use them. So it costs money to issue cards. I can understand the $3, though some may not like that. And I don't get the walk up for the reduced fares. It's cumbersome. I had a trouble with it at a token booth one time. I couldn't use my Visa card. I have a reduced fare card, and I think we should make it easier to get reduced fare credentials, especially remotely. I think that variable pricing on bridges is reasonable. The Bay Bridge in California did that for a while pre-COVID. We want to use it as a congestion management tool. And technology is important. I don't see sending things through the mail. So, I mean, more and more people are getting phones, even free phones. So streamline it, make mail and ride mobile only. And we should remove the fare collection from the rails. Less interaction, go to proof of payment. Other railroads use it. We just got to make things simpler and cut down on interaction in these challenging times. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Monica Tremblay, followed by Jonathan Baldwin.
Unmute. Okay, hello?
Please
Let's
begin.
see. Okay. All right, I am actually a constituent who's also an attorney. I live in West Harlem. In fact, I actually had to flee for my personal safety back in March when COVID started. And I came back in September to hear about how a lot of women felt unsafe, did not even feel comfortable taking the subways by themselves. I read of numerous violent incidents that happened in the subway, which is exacerbated by the decrease in ridership and people feeling unsafe. So I hear about all of this now, and we want to increase fares in the middle of a pandemic with decreased ridership, with more people out of work, with a lot of things going on. And I'm thinking, really? We can't be a little better than that? We can't think of, okay, what about executive pay? What about other things that could be cut instead of trying to smash on the backs of innocent people and people who are already struggling, who are worried about having enough food to eat, about whether they can even stay in New York or even want to come back? Who would want to come as a tourist or just in general as a woman, come onto the subway, come onto transit and have to worry about their personal safety and have the increase in fares? And I feel it's also a travesty to do this to the emergency workers, the essential workers, people who are still trying to keep the city running and they still have to fear for their lives every day. To me, that's insane. So I absolutely oppose this. I echo what many of the other commenters have said, and something else has got to be done. We can't just put it on the New Yorkers and the people who are still here. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Jonathan Baldwin, followed by Felicia Park Rogers.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, please begin.
Yes, thank you. Good evening. My name is Jonathan Baldwin. I'm actually a bus operator for New York City Transit in a Brooklyn division. Those who did say, there was congratulations for coming up every day during the pandemic. That is greatly appreciated. Thank you very much for that. Layoffs are not the answer at my side of view with this. As everyday bus operator in Brooklyn, you have cars who park usually in bus lanes and bus stops. We have cameras on the bus. These cameras can actually give you guys more money when they park into a bus stop where they shouldn't be there. It's not a parking spot for cars. It's for the customers who need us at the curb, wheelchairs. They need us at the curb, not in the street. So you can charge these vehicles that are parking illegally in a bus stop a whopping $300 as a fine and get that money back. That's my suggestion. Talk to your frontline workers who are behind the seats, behind the trains, because we have suggestions for you guys. We have ideas. You want to get money back that you lost in the pandemic? This is the way to do it. But at the same time, laying us off will not be the way to do so at all. It's unfair to us, our families, and those who depend on us every day on the road, whether it's train or buses. But as I said before, you have cars who park every day illegally in bus stops. We have cameras on the bus. We can take pictures. They can get fined. It can be done. You have bus lane cameras. That's working. This can work. This can be done. That's my time. Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Felicia Park Rogers, followed by Scott Kravitz.
Good evening. My name is Felicia Park Rogers, and I am the Director of Regional Infrastructure Projects for Tri-State Transportation Campaign, a regional advocacy and policy organization working to reduce congestion, pollution, and to improve commutes. As we are in the midst of the holiday season, first of all, I would like to express my deepest condolences to all of the family members and friends of MTA workers who died this year due to COVID-19. In these unprecedented times, the board is facing an impossible set of choices between worse and even more worse as you confront the incomprehensible budget gap left in the wake of significantly reduced revenue. The alarm bells are ringing. The transit crisis in New York City is getting worse each day that passes without a new round of federal stimulus dollars. We call on Congress, and particularly the Senate, to stop its politicization of emergency relief funds for our nation and to immediately pass a proposal that includes meaningful aid for transit, including billions for the MTA. Even as the system is facing tremendous crisis, we ask the board to please delay the implementation of previously scheduled fare hikes due to be enacted in 2021. Raising fares at this time in combination with deep service cuts will set the MTA on a death spiral of lower ridership, reduced fare box revenue, and slowing our region's economic recovery, putting tremendous stress on our region's most vulnerable residents at further risk and having a disproportionately negative impact on Black and Brown communities, essential and frontline workers who heavily depend on public transit. We support the increase to raise tolls and implement variable price tolling as a means of raising funds, as well as discouraging car congestion and pollution. We're strongly against eliminating the 7-day and 30-day passes. Essential workers need them. Thank you for your leadership during these incredibly difficult times.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Scott Kravitz, followed by Frank Lorenzo.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, you may begin.
Okay. Good evening, panel. I am the little guy. Basically, I'm a track inspector from Staten Island. I work in Brooklyn. To get into work every week, I pay $27.50, and that's with the current discount. If that's eliminated, I'll be paying in excess of $60 a week just to get to work. I really have no other reason to get into Brooklyn other than that. So to me, it makes absolutely great sense to keep the discount in effect. Also, I see on more than several occasions people jumping or ducking the turnstiles. So my question is, wouldn't it make more sense to build ceiling to floor turnstiles, which obviously will prevent that? I realize it's costly, but nothing worthwhile is ever cheap. And that's basically my point for the evening. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Frank Lorenzo, followed by Zachary Borodkin.
Hello?
Yes, you may begin.
Yes, thank you so much. Good evening. I want to thank everyone on this call for allowing me to speak tonight. Much like myself, you've probably been working all day, and now you probably had your third cup of coffee just to stay awake, so thank you. I can see by your faces I'm correct. So I just want to give you a couple of ideas that I had. I am firmly opposed against raising any sort of fares whether it be just for Staten Island residents, for anyone across the city. Like many of my friends who spoke on this call earlier, it's affecting every race, color, and creed across this wonderful city. Doesn't matter where you come from, what part of the city, we're all hurting very much. So I'm asking you to put off this vote to increase the fares until next year. I think we should seek revenue generating ideas from the public instead of raising fares. Create a public-private partnership to address the financial solvency issues of the MTA. And I know you're doing an incredible job with this incredible circumstance you're being faced with. I think one proposed idea you can possibly think of right now is refinancing the existing MTA debt. From what I understand, 19% of the revenue that's generated by the MTA goes towards just debt service, which I think is a little bit unacceptable. We should definitely try to get that down to at least 12 or 13%, which we can most certainly do. Fare evasion, $300 million a year plus, that needs to be addressed. I think we should look at how many times that F5 button is pressed on these buses. I know the IG's office looked into this, and they actually determined that there was some sort of a deficiency in the reporting mechanism, so that definitely has to be looked into. So that's $300 million a year. Over 10 years, that's $3.6 billion that the MTA is not generating. So that could have been in a savings account for the MTA right now, which we could have drawn from if we had collected those fares, which I think is rather unfortunate. Also, a voluntary audit to look at the operational deficiencies in the MTA, not to criticize them, but to help us come to some sort of idea on how to fix this
Please
situation.
conclude your remarks.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Bobby Gorel, followed by Selena Gray.
Can you hear me?
Yes, please begin.
Okay. My name is Bobby. I live in Ridgewood. I'm a daily MTA rider and use fares. I'm opposed to all the proposed fare hikes and service cuts. I rely on unlimited Metro cards as I often transfer multiple times within 2 hours. Eliminating unlimited Metro cards seems merely an attempt to prevent solidarity swipes. Just another pathetic and heartless maneuver in the MTA's fanatical campaign to punish the poor. As it is unlikely Congress will deliver $12 billion or possibly any stimulus funding, MTA leadership must lobby the New York governor and state legislature for new taxes on the rich and luxury real estate, increased gas taxes, and an Amazon shipping charge, all of which combined could generate billions for the MTA in dedicated revenues. Pat Foy is lying when he claims such lobbying is, quote, above his pay grade. MTA leaders have indeed lobbied the state government to fund the MTA in the past and must do so now in this moment. Finally, I will say that no one I know has heard about these proposed fare hikes and service cuts. Every person I've told has been livid, and they all say the same thing: I won't pay. Either they will stop riding transit altogether, or they will evade the fare and risk a ticket or police brutality, especially if they are Black or brown. It doesn't take a genius to realize that this is a lose-lose situation for everyone. I can only hope the MTA realizes this sooner rather than later. That's all.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Selena Gray, followed by Joseph Fedoriano.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, executive board members and senior staff. My name is Selena Gray. I'm a political community organizer with the New York State Nurses Association and a Democratic candidate running in council in the 49th district, as well as a North Shore Staten Island resident. The MTA can no longer balance their budget on the backs of Staten Islanders. Staten Island is a transportation desert, and we are always an afterthought when it comes to transportation needs. We are the only borough without a mass transit system that links us to the other boroughs. The thought of any fare hikes or toll increases on the Verrazano Bridge will amount to additional taxes on working class families in which we cannot afford. The MTA needs to seek assistance from the federal government and stop using fare increases and the reduction of workforce to recoup revenue. We all know that the MTA was in trouble prior to the pandemic, and the state should have stepped in then. It is now up to the federal government to preserve our transportation system in our city and seek other revenue-raising alternatives. I strongly oppose any increase in fares, decrease in workforce, and proposed elimination of the resident discount on the Verrazano Bridge. I say again, Staten Islanders cannot afford to commute back and forth to work. They cannot afford any additional cost to commute back and forth to work. Thank you for your time and have a great evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Joseph Fedoriano, followed by George Wanaka.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Joseph Fedoriano, representing the Staten Island small business community and fellow residents. There are a lot of business people who have to travel outside of the island to retrieve goods and services in order to deliver those products to the consumer. Examples include florists, jewelers, boutiques, restaurants, among other business types. Traveling is expensive, but imagine what will happen when the toll discount is removed. I want to also raise the issue about small business owners using commercial vehicles. The toll discount cannot be applied to commercial vehicles unless they travel 10 times with Easy Pass tolls in a qualifying calendar month. So the discount of 16.25% is totaling to $25.13 in tolls. Some of the industries that I've cited use commercial vehicles to retrieve their goods and services, and when those goods are delivered, an additional charge is incurred. Small businesses are suffering right now because Governor Cuomo has harmed us with burgeoning and onerous regulation. It is quite frankly my opinion that this revocation of the resident discount will lead to other discounts being revoked. Not only are you hurting small business owners, but you're hurting community residents as well. The cost residents will be incurring with this discount revocation will be almost 3.78% of the average household income on Staten Island. I do not support this move for that reason as well. Most people on this island commute because they have real jobs. Not only are you hurting the small business owners, but you're also hurting the residents as well, as I mentioned earlier. I want to also raise the issue about the discriminatory disparity that exists, because why do Staten Islanders have to incur the burden of bridge tolls and higher transportation fares? On the free inter-borough bridges, you could implement cashless tolling and all of the boroughs would share the debt equally. We are not the leading cause of your debt, and we should not be burdened with that cost. If you were a fully private entity instead of a quasi-governmental organization, you'd be in complete bankruptcy and we would never bail you out. So I demand that you keep the discount and learn to manage your finances better so you can reduce the liability, which we could travel over the bridge without having to pay exorbitant tolls. Let me also note that you should improve your transportation quality because it is horrendous. This is what I have to say, and I'm making a nice statement loud and clear because this is wrong for Staten Island.
Thank you. The next speaker will be George Wanaka, followed by Amanda K. Johnson. As a reminder, if you have joined the Zoom under a name that is not what you used to register to speak under, please identify yourself with the name used for registration in the Q&A function at this time. Thank you. Mr. Wanaka, when you're ready.
Thank you, Commissioner Foy, senior staff. Thank you for holding this public hearing today, as well as the previous ones you've already done. Good evening. My name is George S. Wanaka. I'm a small business owner, and I'm also a candidate for the 50th Council District in Staten Island, New York. In 2012, our elected officials fought successfully to make sure Staten Islanders were not the forgotten borough by creating the Staten Island resident toll discount for the Verrazano Narrows Bridge. And now, just a few years later, these hearings have the possibility of reducing or even eliminating said discount. Now, the effects of this elimination will be long-lasting as well as damaging. Now, our borough, quite frankly, is an island. Absent adequate mass transportation services and affordable roadways and bridges, our residents simply have no way to commute off the island, especially to Manhattan, a chief economic source for many. It is astonishing that previous comments and statements given by members of the MTA have all but ignored the needs of our borough. In fact, their capital plan barely mentions Staten Island. Left unchecked, Staten Island will remain the forgotten borough and continue on as one of the most underserved boroughs in terms of transportation. Our elected leaders have spoken for years about fast ferries and other mass transportation connections with very few results being achieved. In an era where many Staten Island residents are struggling to survive the long-reaching effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, we must not let the MTA's poor fiscal management be solved on their backs. Even under normal circumstances, the MTA has consistently shown no ability to either balance its finances or plan for extreme circumstances. Instead, when faced with a deficit dilemma, the tired response is echoed. an increase in fares for hardworking New Yorkers. It's time for true transparency in government. It's time for wasteful spending to go away so hardworking Staten Islanders don't pay
Please
for
conclude
consistent
your
mistakes.
remarks.
And in short, it's time for a change. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Amanda K. Johnson, followed by Frank Sacco.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Amanda K. Johnson. I'm a union carpenter and a resident of Staten Island. I've also been a resident of New York City and lived in all 5 boroughs since 2008. I'm on this call because I'm against every single form of fare hikes that you guys are considering. I, as an essential worker, take the public transportation regularly. I do occasionally drive as well. And I know that if you were to eliminate the 30-day Metro card, that would greatly adversely affect me. Also, as mentioned, the resident fares for the Verrazano Bridge would affect me as well. I don't think the issue that you need to be considering is what kind of fare to raise or how, but I think the issue that you really need to go back and look at is how is your budget being managed? In all the years since I've been here, I have never once seen the fare hike improve my service. I've seen it only decline my service or cut my service. I've had to wait and wait and wait for buses numerous times or have trains not come. And because of my job and having to get to work at very early hours, I often have to wait quite a while, including having even a 3-hour commute one way to work. So please, as I said, I'm against any and all fare hikes, and I advocate for you to go back, look at your budget, and see what you can do, because the real issue to me seems to be mismanagement for all of these years, as well as not having any sort of adequate backup plan in the case of something like COVID happening, where you have a massive loss of revenue. Thank you for your time to consider my comments. Have a good evening.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Frank Sacco, followed by Michael Howard.
Hi, I just want to say that I am opposed to any toll hikes and/or bus fares for the city's used to be Tri-Borough Bridge and Tunnel Authority, now the MTA, Bridges and Tunnels. It seems that we get a raise every 2 years with the fares and the tolls, regardless of any of the hearings or what we have to say. I agree with a lot of the speakers that it's absurd during the essential workers going to work without any way to virtually work from home, that we have to keep going to work. And now with everything, we're going to be affected by toll hikes. And we are not able to work from home. And the Staten Island resident discount is the worst part of it, that you're proposing to eliminate the discount completely, causing many to avoid not going across by whatever means necessary. As many have said, that's the only way of crossing, is to go over the Verrazano Narrows Bridge. We can't even bring the cars on the ferry. And just reading some of the raises, the raise in if the Staten Island resident is gone, it will go from $550 for a raise of 123% and 245% with a full fare of $19. Just think of the raise that will cost a week. So many people won't be able to afford that, and the essential workers have, like I said, no remorse to go over. There's no other way to cross, and the split tolling was just done. It seemed that the split tolling was done not to stop traffic from Staten Island trucks, but in a way to raise fares and now higher tolls and eliminating the resident discount, which is absurd, and many people can't afford to do it. We need to do more with less, maybe with the MTA. I still have a lot of love for the MTA, but the MTA needs to do more with less and cuts and no layoffs for agency initiative to save money on their end better, besides federal funding.
Please conclude your remarks.
And besides federal funding, which even if the federal funding is received,
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Michael Howard, followed by Clarita Valen. Please make sure that once your screen updates, your camera and microphone are enabled, and then begin your remarks.
Okay, good evening. My name is Michael Howard. I reside in Queens, which is Far Rockaway, and I have a mild intellectual disability, and I use half-fare MetroCard, and all I want to say is I oppose these service cuts, and I also oppose the fare raise, just because Congress is not doing their job. Congress, I beg you to do your job and fund these states and cities that needs help, okay? Because you guys go along with rich, large corporations that will try to take us down, and it's bad enough. It's bad enough. More than 300,000 people died from COVID in this whole country. But in this city, some death counts say is more than 25,000, or some say is more than 35,000. Well, I know my time is almost up, but I just want to say I like to see more stations accessible, and I like to see more navigations inside the buses from 2008 all the way up to now. My time is up. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Clarita Valen, followed by Sheba Simpson.
Hello?
Yes,
Oh, hi.
please begin.
My name is Clarita Valen, and I am a disabled rider that uses Accessorize. So I'm opposed to the fare increase. We barely, I barely get a check that covers my monthly expenses, and when we get an increase in our check, it's only about $1 and change, and that makes it very hard. And I feel much safer riding on Accessorize because I'm in a wheelchair, and I agree with the gentleman that spoke before that say that they should fine these people that are on the bus lanes, because sometimes the driver has to let me off in the middle of the street, and I find that quite dangerous. And I'm really afraid. And most of the time, bus drivers are really very professional and very nice, and they make sure that I get off safely. But I'm still concerned about the fact that these vehicles are in the bus lanes, and sometimes they're parking there, blocking the curb where I can get off safely. And finally, the other thing that I know that as being an accessorized user, I believe that there are inspections, but I don't know who does those inspections. Are they by the MTA or by the carriers? But last Sunday, on December 6th, I had this a little unnerving incident in which this inspector came in, but he didn't identify himself. He just stared at us while the driver was securing my chair. And finally, I had the courage to ask the driver. I said, "Do you know him?" And he said, "Oh yes, he's just one of those. They're just watching us to make sure that we're doing our job." And I said, "Oh." So I told the guy, I said, "You know, sir, it would have been nice if you identify yourself, especially during these times where there are a lot of crazy people You really scare me, just staring at us and not saying anything. I think that you should identify yourself as an MTA employee or an accessory employee.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Sheba Simpson, followed by Roberta Mittelman.
Good evening. My name is Sheba Simpson, and I am a candidate for New York City Council for District 9 for 2021. I am totally opposed to the fare increases and the reduction in service. As a native New Yorker and in one of the communities that have always been disenfranchised whenever decisions are made in the city, especially when it comes to transportation, I think that this is the most egregious decision to be made in such a difficult time for all New Yorkers, but especially for those who are the most marginalized. There are many ways that could be addressed to ensure that the most marginalized communities are not, again, become the sheeps once again at the decisions made by the people at the MTA. How about we change the roles and start asking the rich to pay for the subsidies that need to be put in place for the MTA? What about the leadership taking reduction in pay? We can no longer keep asking the people who make the city run, protect us, to bear the burden of a fare increase and reduced ridership. Again, I oppose all increases in fares and reduction in service. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Roberta Mittelman. Please remember that once your screen updates, you need to turn your camera and microphone to be enabled and begin your remarks. The time is now 6:45 p.m. At this time, we will take a brief break and resume at 6:55 p.m. During the break, please feel free to take the voluntary survey, which will be visible on your screen, to assist us in understanding the effectiveness of our outreach for these hearings. When we resume, I will call through the remaining list of registered speakers who have either not joined us or have had technical difficulties. After concluding this second reading, the hearing will conclude at 7:00 p.m. if we have no further registered speakers present. Again, if you are registered to speak this evening but haven't heard your name called, please provide your name you registered under in the Q&A function during the break, and we will add your name to the queue. Thank you. The time is now 6:55 p.m., and we will now resume the hearing. As I mentioned before the break, we have several speakers registered for tonight's hearing who have either not joined us or were having technical difficulties. I will call through the remaining speakers now. As a reminder, if you joined the Zoom under a name different than the name you registered to speak under, or you were registered and haven't heard your name called, please indicate in the Q&A function now. John Macbeth, Jimmy Chu, Nicholas Robbins, Kylie Holloway, Susan Goldberg, Iman Ramawi, Alexander Roskovitz, Eric Chichinowski, Jamal Anthony, Mohammed Razel, Deirdre McNamara, Zachary Borodkin, Henry Flax, Angela Chupe, Tonya Davis, Kimberly McLaurin, Seth Flicker, Nicholas Gennaro, Marvin Lezingue, Alba Lugo, Don Robb, Stephen Donate, Nicole Edgar, Eric Josephson, Ali Fellman, Latasha Valentine, Sandra Bufiend, Olivia Bufiend, Dan Massey, Kim Moscaratolo, Neil Kowalski, Lissa and Neil Witchell, Kathleen Francis, Patricia Clay, James O'Shea, Roberta Middleman, Omar Vera, Gabrielle Reckler, David Paul Gerber, Charles Muniz. Seth Rosenberg. Thank you all for joining us this evening. The time is currently 7:00 p.m. This concludes the 7th of 8 virtual fare and toll hearings. Please visit new.mta.info/2020 hearings to register for an upcoming hearing. As a final reminder, in addition to the virtual hearings, there are several other ways you can provide comments, ask questions, or make requests. We encourage the public to comment via the Fare and Toll Hearing website, new.mta.info/2020 hearings. You may also send a letter to MTA Government and Community Relations, Fairs and Crossing Changes Virtual Public Hearing, 2 Broadway, New York, New York, 10004, or call the public hearing hotline at 646-252-6777. Telephone agents are available from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. daily. Thank you and good night.